Fortunately, I have had several conversations with you before, and every time we talk, it's just amazing.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. Yeah.
It is. So thank you for coming and joining me on my live. But I know I did the introduction, but I'm guaranteeing you could probably do a better introduction of yourself. So why don't you tell everyone who you are and why you do what you do?
Well, the reason I'm Bill Mitchell, and I'm the author of a book. In fact, this is the book. You can see it here, When Dating Hurts. And not a very happy book, but a very helpful book. And When Dating Hurts is on Amazon. And When Dating Hurts is a book that was written about 10 years after, or started 10 years after my daughter was killed by her boyfriend. So my daughter, Kristen Mitchell, graduated from St. Joseph's University outside of Philadelphia in 2005. And that was the last day that I saw her alive, and the first day that I met her boyfriend, who 20 days after her graduation murdered her in her apartment one evening. So, you kind of go from a family of four to a family of three, and then it's like your life doesn't resemble itself. You're on a whole different trajectory. So it didn't happen right away, because the first year was really about getting him in prison. He's still there today, but not there probably forever. Too bad. But so I was asked to give a number of speeches over the years. I've probably given over 200 live speeches or interviews and things. And then 10 years into it, I was writing some Instagram posts and putting things out about a parent's worst nightmare. And somewhere along the line, someone wrote back and said, why don't you stop doing these posts and why don't you start working on the book? So the book finally got done. It took about 4 years pecking away. It's my first book, so it wasn't like I was, John Grisham here. But it's been a very successful book. It's only through Amazon, and it comes in all three flavors. You can get the paperback, you can get the ebook, and you can get the audiobook, which I narrated myself. In doing that, in narrating it and editing the reading of that, gave me enough confidence to take a crack at doing a podcast, which I've been doing now I'm in my 6th year. And at this point in time, we have over 2.5 million downloads total over all the years. And I'm happy about that, specifically because it means a whole lot of people around the world have heard the podcast and have gotten a lot out of it, because most of my interviews nowadays are with survivors or family members of survivors, or in some cases, I just seriously 3 days ago interviewed the mother of Gabby Petito, which most of you people probably have heard of, but it was a very national case a few years back. So I interviewed her, and I'm editing that now, and it should be out Tuesday of next week. But so it's been it's been my mission. Yes, no, that's fine. But that was quite a coup to get her. She's a lovely woman. I mean, it's a great family, so it's just increases the tragedy around that whole thing.
And they recently just did they've started a foundation for her, isn't that right?
Yeah, they've had the foundation for a while. They've had it for a while, and it's gaining a lot of power around the world. They're smart, because they're doing a lot of what they call the Gabby Petito Alliance, which means they're working with other foundations. They're not trying to just do everything themselves. So they're gaining power by flying along with a whole lot of other foundations and associations that handle some facets that they don't have, or they're not that good at, so. But it should be a wonderful interview for people to listen to, because she doesn't hold back in a lot of ways, has very specific feelings about his family and him. And anyway, so yeah, but the thing I'm proud about doing the book, because people have accepted it so well. But the podcast is great, because you write a book, it's done, you send it off, and you don't write the book over. The podcast is always a new thing. There's always some other survivor who contacts me, and that's the way we do it. And they write me at billmitchell@whendatinghurts.com. That's all you got to do. And we set it up, and then we do it. And these are not professional people on the other end. They're just people who are in horrible relationships. On a scale of 1 to 10, some of them are probably 1s and 2s, and some of them are 12s and 15s. I mean, just mind blowing. So anyway, that's what I do.
And the reason I reached out to you, and I've been on your podcast, I think twice now, and enjoyed
Yes.
both times immensely.
Yes.
And I decided this year, 2026, that we're going to start doing Instagram lives to try and just get really direct involvement with the public on different issues. And this month happens to be Stalking Awareness Month. And so I reached out and I said, well, hey, would you like to come on? Because I figured out of someone that knows a little bit about stalking, it's probably you, through all the interviews you've done. And we talked this morning.
Yeah, we did.
And you shared with me two of your episodes. It's a two-part, episode 292 and episode 293, with the woman. The name she used was Hazel in that particular interview,
Yeah.
and she has a
Oh my God.
awful stalking story. Did you want to talk a little bit
Sure.
about
Sure.
that? I mean, I'm going to urge everyone to go listen to it. It's a two-parter. It's really good. It's horrific for so many reasons, but really kind of gives an idea of how innocent something can start and then turn into something horrific.
Yeah, I mean, some of the people who are, well, people who are stalkers, I mean, they kind of in their minds at least kind of glue themselves to you. You know, they want you badly, you know, one way or another. They want you badly, but you don't want them at all usually. So that situation, and what's part of what makes it so mind-blowing is it started out when she was about 15 years old, and only in the last few years has it ceased for a while, and that's because he got in a lot of trouble with the law. So she knows it's gone on in a very you know, with him calling her and emailing her and writing to her. She had a pretty busy 20 years with this guy. I mean, 15 to 35. Come on. He never really got the message, you know, that we're not an item. He started out very innocently. Now, the one thing that was also sad about her situation was that she came up in a pretty dysfunctional family, and her boyfriend at that time, not this guy we're talking about, but her boyfriend at that time was in a dysfunctional family, and his best friend was also in one. So you picture Hazel and these two guys. So the one guy was the boyfriend, and the other one was a guy in the story she just calls D, his first letter of his real name. So D was just kind of the third wheel, let's just say. And so they would just hang out as three people quite often. And D was just kind of a tag along. At some point, she and her boyfriend broke up in high school still. And D decided that this was his big moment to step in and be the new boyfriend. And she had no interest in that at all.
And made
So,
it very clear to him that she
yeah,
was not interested at all.
yes. I mean, she was okay being friends at a little bit of a distance, but you know, you're not it.
You're not
And
my
he,
type.
yeah, you're not my type, and you never will be. But in his mind, I'm always on the verge. So that was going on, and all kinds of just. Then he tried everything from trying to be the boyfriend to being disruptive. You know, like patterns of harassment in different ways. You know, just what you would call on this podcast or on this thing you're doing here, unwanted contact is a nice medicinal way to put it. But
That's the
disturbing,
clean way of putting it.
right? Exactly. Well, you know, I figure if you're doing this, it has to be clean, right?
Right.
I think. Is that right?
Some, well, I'm from Texas and I'm a litigation attorney, so occasionally some bad words slip out of my
I'll try to be careful, at least at this time. So, but I mean, some of his things, even, you know, in the earlier years, creepy poems that he would either email to her or he would handwrite them and give them to her. You know, this kind of disturbing stuff, suicide ideation, you know, kind of this, if we can't be boyfriend and girlfriend, you know, I might kill myself. So, you know, that's, and that usually falls under the heading too of red flags, even in an unhealthy relationship, which they didn't even really have a relationship.
Yeah. If someone's threatening suicide, red flag. I mean, it doesn't matter if you're
Right,
dating or not. Someone
right,
threatens it. And there's exceptions, like they're really mental health issues, but this
right.
type of scenario, it's for
You,
attention.
you could do a show on just suicide because it's more
Right.
complicated than most people think.
It
Okay.
is. I agree.
I'll just say quickly that a lot of people who talk about committed suicide, in their minds, they'll kill you and then they'll kill themselves. Or if you're married, they may kill the whole family and then kill themselves. So it's not just as simple as I'm going to step off the stage here and go kill myself.
I'm not going to exit stage left quietly, is what it usually
Yeah,
is.
yeah. I'm going to disrupt. I'm going to do a lot of permanent things on the way out. In his case, what would fall under the heading of physical surveillance. So one of the things he would do is he'd write her notes and letters. He knew where she'd pick up her bus in the morning. And so he might go there, and this is like 6:30 in the morning. He would go there and tape something to a post by there. And evidently he had a way he would fold paper. So it would kind of, without his name on it, let her know this is from him. So it's like, oh my God, he was just here. He was just here. He's not here now, but he was just here. If she wasn't home, or if she was home, would hang out in the cul-de-sac, and was even caught chain smoking by her bedroom window at different times. Nice to have that going on where, you're trying to go to bed at night and he's within feet of you. And later on, after high school, she got a job and she's trying to get on with her life. And he was just trying to, be her shadow in life. But showing up where she worked, trying to break into her home at night was another intrusion situation. He and one of his buddies decided they're going to knock on the door, and she answered it with her brother. Now this is late at night. Like the middle of the night. Again, her family was dysfunctional. So I think one parent, I haven't heard this particular episode in a little bit, but I think one parent was alcoholic and mom was just kind of dysfunctional.
So stepdad was the alcoholic and was the better of the parents, and mom, I think, was borderline and some pretty severe mental health issues. But my recollection, because I listened to it today, my recollection was stepdad was basically an alcoholic and a pretty bad one. But between the parents, the better of the two, and in fact, her boyfriend basically moved in shortly after they started dating at like age 14, 15, and was living there off and on because his house was so dysfunctional.
Right. As bad as hers was, his seemed to be worse, at least in their minds. So it's something that I would say probably very few people watching this can relate to. I would think.
I would hope.
Yeah, I would pray.
Yeah.
So, let's see. Yeah, different things. Just like I say, showing up where she worked, trying to break into her home, threatening to maybe kill her dog if we're not an item. If you won't date me and we're not an item, then I'll kill your dog. All kinds of psychological, social dynamics. Kind of got to the point of trauma bonding, and that's one of the problems she had with both of those guys, that their families were highly dysfunctional, as was hers. So in a way, that became the relationship that they all can relate to.
Well, I think that's what she talked about, because her boyfriend, the one that I guess moved in, it was her first real relationship. And so what she talked about was it wasn't normal for a situation period, let alone her first relationship. And if you come from a dysfunctional family, that really set the groundwork for just nonstop dysfunction. I think you know as probably well as I do, is that people that grow up in that type of situation really look back to recreate dysfunction in their adult lives, because for whatever reason provide some normalcy or comfort, because that's what they're used to. That's what their bodies are used to.
Right. It's bizarre to think that becomes their normal.
But it does. Yeah.
Yeah. My life is crazy. How's yours? So.
I don't want to talk about mine.
No. Well, that was a general. That's a general.
But yeah. But I thought what was interesting, because you and I talked about this, was that she tried to get away. She tried to move on. She got married, right? And then she picked her husband for a particular reason. Did you want to talk about that?
So So what happens is that at some point in time, she feels like I got to get out of town. I got to get away from this guy. So she meets up with somebody who's stationed he's an army guy, he's military, and he's on a base somewhere that's like 2 hours away, hour and a half, 2 hours away. And I guess there's some version of love there, but part of the attraction was, he wants to get married, I want to get married. And the guy's a big, strong guy, and he had a lot of training with weapons and things. And she shared, well, I got this guy who's, bugging me, stalking me. So she probably felt like maybe I can sleep at night because I've got some, I got Captain America here with me or something, like that.
You felt safe.
Right. Yeah. She's finally got a bodyguard. So that's going on. But unfortunately, that only lasted a year and a half or so. And then she was back on her own again. Now, part of what's interesting about it with this guy is that he was the bad guy in the story, the stalker, was a highly adept at what he did. As an example, he was always monitoring her in different ways. So in this case, soon after she was divorced, this guy was aware of it. Now he's back calling her and tracking her down. Now, one of the things that she did was she bought what she felt was her dream home, which was a couple hours away from where the stalker was. But in this part, I don't know if I agree with her. This is all out west now, by the way. This is like, mountains and trees and stuff. So, but she's out that way, and she buys a house that's kind of secluded. I can see where that's a good idea, and I can see where that's a horrible idea. Because if he ever shows up one night, and he did, you don't have very much going for you. You're not in an apartment where you can scream a few times and maybe somebody can come and help you.
Right. Her next closest neighbor was, a little ways away. This was not like she could have screamed and someone would have heard.
Right. It was an elderly couple that knew her pretty well, but didn't know the story of Mr. Stalker here. So it all kind of comes down to this guy who's calling her. He's calling her with different phone numbers, so he must be picking up burner phones left and right or getting his number changed left and right. And she did a pretty good job of collecting evidence about him, anything that she could do to document what he had done. And of course, we're at the point in the story all of a sudden where we're like 20 years into this thing. She's like 33 or 4 at the time that this is coming to a head. So finally, this one night he's calling her and he just wants, one of the things he did too, let me back up a couple of years. One of the things he did was 10 years after they were both out of high school, and she was away at the time, he then went and appealed to her parents saying that he had been to Alcoholics Anonymous, and part of that was to make good or make amends with people he may have harmed in the past, like when he tried to break in their house that night. So that was kind of an excuse to get in the door. Now, the dysfunctional parents, they're not looking at it like, get the hell out of here. You're bad news. They're looking at it like, oh, wow, that's so great that he came by. And it's like, well, thanks, Mom and Dad. You still don't really buy what's going on here. This guy is, this guy's like the demon in my life. This is how much I really, want to be around this guy. But it comes down to him trying to go see her, and he comes down the road one night with his music blasting in his car. He comes down the road at 10:30 at night, and he pulls into the wrong driveway, which is the elderly neighbors next door who are trying to figure out what's going on. And I believe they tried to contact her, like, what's going on here with this car out here and everything. And then the guy must figure out, crap, I must have gone to the wrong house. So comes over to where she is. He's already called her by this time, so she knows exactly who's out there. And gets words like over the phone, Hazel, I just want to talk with you. And she kind of goes into shock at that point. But thank God the neighbor, in the meantime, calls the police. So now it's going down to the final scene in this scary movie that we're describing, except it's real, where she is kind of in shock with this guy calling. She's running around the house. She finally goes into a bedroom and gets in a closet. And she can literally hear the gravel of him walking around outside of the house when finally the police show up, thank God, and he tries to make a run for it, and they get a hold of him while he's fleeing the place. And they do wind up arresting him, but it doesn't really do much good in terms of, and even though he had a weapon in his car, and she said she kind of had a feeling one day this would happen, and it kind of looks like it was that, which is, chances are, if he got into the house, he was going to kill her. I mean, there's, you can't say that would happen, but come on. Oh, he claimed that he was on a hunting and camping trip, and yet there's no camping equipment in the car. Hello, you
I'm
know,
guessing there was no sleeping bag, there was no tent, there was no canteen. It was just a firearm,
just a
but he
weapon,
needed that for hunting and camping.
right? In case he wants to shoot a fish. So, yeah, so quite a mess there at the end there. He Let's see. So in the end, he's convicted of stalking. He did do a plea deal, and she did get something that's very rare, which is a lifetime restraining order on this guy. So I have various feelings, Michelle, you probably do too, about
I
restraining,
do.
but at least it's a paper trail. I used to say on this podcast that I have that it's a piece of paper, it's not a shield. We've all heard
Hmm.
that.
Yep.
And that is true, but it does create a paper trail that if that person violates it, then at least that's just some more evidence, some more documentation of this person's bad behavior. And hopefully it all adds up to this person is removed from your life. So,
The one thing that I talk about with regards to protective orders, and in Texas now, you can get protective orders for stalking and harassment, is in Texas in particular, I can't tell you about the other states, but it allows law enforcement to arrest the individual if that there is a protective order. And so I completely agree with you. The problem is someone who wants to kill you is going to walk through that protective order. And it's just a piece of paper, so you have to stay diligent.
yes,
That being said, if you do have a protective order and there are violations, it does allow law enforcement to arrest that person for violations of the protective order, which I think is one of the benefits. I do think there are some additional benefits for protective orders because I do think that in some cases it does detour or it does. I mean, it gets the okay, I'll stay away. Not at all, but I think it helps slow it down maybe to some extent.
right.
But I mean, I talk about one back when I was a judge. This would have been 2011. I had an individual who was seeking a protective order. She's now deceased because her husband walked through her protective order and killed her.
Wow.
And he found her outside of her salon first thing in the morning and stabbed her 28 times and killed her and walked right through that protective order. And so what we talk about a lot, because I think there's a difference between like intimate partner stalking and then like the stalking that we see with complete and absolute strangers. Like, it's always the Hollywood ones that you hear the most stories about. However, I can assure you that there are very much stranger stalking cases in the general public. I know because I presided over some of them. I mean, I had college students who, one gentleman, we had this woman who was a beauty pageant queen filed a protective order against a random boy in her class because he was stalking her. She'd never talked to him, never met him. Those are a little bit different, but when you get the intimate partner ones, it is so easy to cross that line into stalking that I think people don't necessarily realize it's stalking. And I'm thinking about, because stalkers violate boundaries. That's just what they do. There's a boundary set, and they say, well, we're going to either walk over it, jump over it, or pole vault over it, just depending on the level of stalking.
Right.
And so they ignore the normal norms of society. But quite often, and even just contested divorces, you will have stalking occurring without people even realizing that's what they're doing. And I go to some pretty specific examples. Cars. No matter what car you drive anymore, whether it's a Ford Explorer, a Volvo, a Mercedes, a Chevy, a Toyota, there are apps to locate your car produced by those manufacturers. So, do you know how often people forget to take their spouse off of that app?
Mm.
And so their spouse can log in immediately and find out exactly where they're at during a divorce. The technology today, I mean, with the one you talk about, I mean, that was 20 years, right? So Hazel Stalker probably didn't have the technology now that exists for stalkers because I will tell you, I think stalking now has become, I think in some regards, much more dangerous because by the time you know you're being stalked, it may be too late. I mean, when you see, and I'm on social media, you're on social media, there's TikTokers, YouTubers, and everyone. But when you start noticing people going through back like 2 and 3 years of your posts and then start liking each and
Oh,
every
yeah.
single one of them,
Yeah. And that's right.
I mean, those are the ones that are like, there's something not quite right. That's just not normal behavior. And so, in
Yeah.
honor of Stalking Month, one of the things I know I wanted to talk about, and I thought you would have some pretty good insight into it, because I think some of the warning signs of stalking are also some of the warning signs of domestic violence. I mean, red flags in relationships are red flags. There is never a test to know whether someone's going to become an abuser. There's never a test to know whether someone's going to become a killer. There's not some definitive test that we can put someone through and it's going to say, yes, they are going to do this
Right.
offense.
Right.
Stop.
Sure.
Right. And stalking in particular is scary. And to me, stalking is one of the scariest types of crimes because you never know when they're going to snap. You never know what is going to be that trigger that's going to make them drive to Hazel's house out in the middle of nowhere with a gun with the intent to do a bad act. Like, you don't know what it is. What I thought was interesting, and I don't know if people think about this or not, but her divorce filing was probably public record.
Oh, sure.
The petition for divorce, the fact that the divorce was granted. I know you can go to about any district clerk, county clerk website in the country and pull up the public records. And so if someone wants to stalk you, boy, has modern technology given them the ability to find your address. And I think now what people need to use, and I think there's a couple programs out there that like Delete Me, where they start wiping some of your information from the internet. But tell me this, Bill, when was the last time you Googled yourself to see what of your personal information was out there?
Yeah. I've done it. I've done it.
Yeah. And I know I had one of my friends run mine recently to find out what they could find out about me. And I was like, oh, that's bad. I mean, because if someone really wants to stalk you,
Right. Right.
there's not much you can do about it. And
Yeah.
so some of the warning signs, and I think we can talk about this in the context of domestic violence and stalking, but common warning signs of stalking. And just so everyone's on the same page, stalking, warning signs of a stalker involve repeated, unwanted behaviors that make you feel unsafe, such as frequent unwanted contact, which is text, calls, gifts, showing up at your home, work, school, online monitoring, surveillance threats, spreading rumors. I mean, it's in most states also specifically define stalking. But what's interesting to me is, and I think one of the real problems is what is unwanted contact, because what unwanted contact is for you may be totally different from unwanted contact for me. And so I think that's one of the maybe lapses in the area of law with regards to what is unwanted contact. What are your thoughts on that with your experience you're on the East Coast, right?
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, what is? Do they have some definition, if you know, about what unwanted contact is, or it's just basically subjective?
I think it's totally subjective. I don't think it's any different anywhere.
Yeah, I mean,
You
it's
know,
just,
I mean,
and then there's
I mean, you're dealing with people who don't want and don't get the message. I mean, they're told time again, look, I like you as a friend, but that's it. Or look, I don't want you to have anything to do with me. We were friends back then. Years have passed. My life is different now. And they're looking at it like, oh, okay, well, I'll just find a different way to approach you now. Or I'll leave you, I'll leave you a present, or I'll do something for you. Or on the other hand, I'll do things to upset you. There was one woman I interviewed, and she talked about a guy who was a real problem, an unhealthy relationship situation. I mean, it was, if there is such a thing as classic domestic violence, but there was that, all kinds of stuff, the physical, the emotional, everything. And she said, and then from time to time, even though she dated this guy, maybe he was even married, but she said, it's now 30 years later, and still, once in a while, he will, it's all the kinds of orders, stay away and all this. He would still come down her street on his motorcycle, stop and rev it really loud, and then take off. Before we finished the interview, he did it. I mean, she said, Bill, can you hear that? Because she didn't know, we were doing a podcast, microphones and all. I said, yes, I hear it. She said, Bill, that's him. And she looked out the window. He says, "Yep, that's him." So that,
And and the problem with that is it's not illegal to drive down a public street.
yeah, that's true. You don't get arrested for that.
You don't get arrested for that, but both he and she know
Yeah,
that that's what he's doing. I mean,
yeah,
and something as simple as that, and one of the frustrating things about stalking is that the victims get frustrated with law enforcement because it's, well, what do you mean you can't do anything about it?
right.
And that example is perfect. It's She probably could tell you the make and model of every motorcycle that drove by and had a particular sound.
Yeah, yeah. And and a different one I'll mention to you, like you mentioned the episodes 292 and 293, which was Hazel. There's another woman who uses the name Anita, and hers are episodes 246, 247, and 248. If people, I hope, are writing this down. Now, she had been married, and I believe she had been married. And anyway, she had a daughter, and she, whatever it was, she didn't have a guy in her life for a while, and she had a daughter who was like 10ish. Again, the story goes back a ways. The kicker is, though, that she went on to one of these dating app kind of deals, and she meets up with a guy whose background is he's a therapist. I mean, he's like a professional therapist seeing patients and all. So she thought, wow, interesting guy. They go out to eat. They have a lovely meal. He's smart, kind of interrupts and stuff. And towards the end of the meal, he says, so I have to ask you this question. Are you going to be my girlfriend? Like, are we an item? And she said, well, you have to understand, I've been around you for like an hour and 45 minutes. And he said, no, I'm serious, because if this doesn't amount to something, I'm done. I'm done. So
After an hour and so many minutes?
Yeah. Well, how long do you need? So,
Well, I mean, love at first sight, right?
yeah.
Wow.
Strange. We haven't even had dessert. So in this case, she says yes, sure, okay, because she figures I won't get a second date. I'm curious about this guy. So they go and they're doing this. They're dating and all this stuff. So there's some parts about him that are not so great, but for the most part, he seems like he's showing up, and I guess he's bringing the goodies, the flowers and all, which is a thin line between isn't that nice and love bombing, But
Yep.
anyway, so now it gets better, or in this case,
Worse. But
it gets worse. It gets worse. So before you know it, he has some good news for her. Now, he was living something like 45 minutes away. And he brings her good news because he just got himself a new apartment, which happened to be a floor or two just below where hers was. So every time she would come out and go down the steps to her car, he could see her. And oftentimes he'd come out and say, hey, how you doing today? Or she'd come home sometimes and she'd come up the steps and he'd stop her because he made dinner for them. So therefore, well, I made the dinner. You are going to come in and eat it, right? Well, my daughter and I were going to do this and that. Oh, no, you don't want to do that. You want to come in here. So he moves in there. He watched her every movement. Now he gets to the point where his behavior's bad. He has a few situations with her, which is pretty much rape. She didn't really want to do it, but he wanted to tonight, so they did it anyway. So they got that going on. So even after they've gone through dragging him into court and all of that and just mess and spending money to try to get this guy off her back. I mean, it's pretty tough when he's living practically in the apartment with you. She would go out to get in her car, even though he had a protective order and all that. She'd go out to get in her car with her daughter, and he'd be standing by the car.
Oh my God.
And they'd even park on the other side of all the lots, and he'd still be over there because he'd eventually figure out where she parked. So that was a toughie. Yeah.
It is tough, and I actually received I had a couple stalking videos go up this week, and I had actually some questions that came through because I said, I'm talking to Bill on Friday. If you got questions, let us know.
Right.
And there was almost an identical scenario where it's a woman in an apartment complex and a neighbor is engaging in that type of behavior. They have not had a relationship, but every time she comes out of her apartment, that person comes out as well. Like,
Yeah.
doesn't matter if she changes the schedule, changes the time, changes what she's doing. And if he thinks she's leaving at the same time, he'll go to his car. When he realizes that she's not coming out, he goes right back in his apartment. I mean, and And none of that is technically illegal.
Right. That's the damning part of it.
That's the scary part, is that's not, oh, is it creepy? Yes. But is it anything that law enforcement can go do with? Probably not, other than going to tell them to knock it off. Now, the good news with the one you talked about is that if you get a protective order, at least in Texas, it under the property code, it allows you to terminate your lease wherever you're at if you get a protective order. So that's actually, I mean, so I think it was probably not uncommon in most of other
You know,
states, but
I
yeah.
think in that case, he had to move out of there. That was part of the deal.
Okay.
Still was showing up in the parking lot.
See, and that's the one where it's like, no, I'll move. You stay wherever you're at. I'm going to go hide, which is also frustrating to victims because they're like, well, why does my life have to change?
Yes, yes, of course.
And it's like, well, it's not fair. And I guess my answer to that question is, to that statement is almost always, I'd rather be alive than it be fair.
Yeah.
And it's,
Your life is different. I mean, it just is different. And easy for me to say, easier for you to say. If somebody said, and they didn't, but if somebody said, what's your advice? I'd say, figure out some way to move far away.
yeah. And that is, yeah.
I mean, I know a woman who was prosecuting cases in Philadelphia many years ago. I met her when we were going through our thing with my daughter's murder. But this one prosecutor's daughter who lived in the area was married, and it finally turned into a domestic violence situation. She was almost killed in her kitchen one night by this guy when he punched her a few times in the head. And it finally came down to her having to make a lot of plans and just move from Philadelphia to the West Coast, and boom, out she went. That it just like get far away and get a P.O. box number. The woman in the story we were talking about, with the 2 episodes, with the whole live out in the country in 20 years, eventually her thing was to rent a place. I mean, she had a house she was buying, but now she's renting a place. She made it clear to the people, I can't, don't publish me and my name around here. And like I said, a P.O. box. And, she actually it was requested of her to maybe get a permit to carry and get a gun, but she was kind of worried about guns. Her husband of a year and a half had PTSD, and she probably went to bed a lot of nights that he might kill himself. So to her, guns equal dead people, so she just didn't want to do that. She had terrible fear of lethal weapons. But, nowadays she's doing background checks on the guy. It's like as best she can. She's actually almost turned it around. She's not stalking him, but checking to see where he is and what he's up to as much as possible. But I mean, if you're 2 hours away, that doesn't take that long to drive over and harass and bother and stick more letters on poles around where you live and things. So,
I heard, scroll back to some of the comments. I saw Courtney comment about the guy who just killed his ex-wife and new husband after 10 years of their divorce being over. And I think that was the dentist that was killed.
yes.
Courtney, if I'm correct, I think that was the dentist and his wife that were killed. And I don't know if anyone who's watching knows, but I also wanted to know about that one, because that's like the 10 years later, you're still so angry or still so jilted that you come kill them 10 years later. I'd be one. I think that is stalking. Two, also I'd be curious to know if there was a custody case or some kind of post divorce litigation going on to see, like, because you always want to know what is the trigger that causes it to all of a sudden spur up after a decade of being apart. And then the other component is, and it's really, again, it's not fair, but you change your life. Like, I'm a big proponent now of telling my clients, the ones that are concerned about their safety because someone's stalking, make sure you have a Ring camera on
Oh,
your door. Make sure you've got cameras on every means of ingress or egress out of your residence. And y'all, it is worth paying for the subscription for the recording so you can download the clips, because evidence, like, you just start stockpiling it. I mean, that's what you're supposed to do. Now, you want to, because law enforcement has a difficulty prosecuting these cases for various reasons. That's not necessarily law enforcement's fault, because they're stuck with the black and white statutes just like judges are. Change your phone number. That being said, keep your original phone number going. So that person can continue to contact you on that phone and either leave messages or send text after text after text after text. But don't block them. Just get a new number and let them keep going, because they'll keep digging their own grave. The more text messages they send without you responding, the better your case is for stalking or harassment. But get a new number. Um, there's some small things you can do and make changes that can keep you safe. But I make technology your friend. There are devices you can buy online to see, I think, to run through your car to see if there's a tracking device or something on your car. You notice some unknown Bluetooth device following you, delete it from your at or find out where it's at. I mean, you have to be smart. One of the other things you can do and we want to make sure about, especially with social media, is that your posts, make sure your metadata is not on those posts. Because a lot of the times, well, I know on iPhones in particular, it shows the longitudinal and latitudinal coordinates of where that picture was taken.
Mm.
And so make sure your metadata is not on there. I would also say if you're going to post on social media, make sure, like if you go on vacation, you post long after you get back from that vacation. Like don't tell the person that's stalking you that, oh, by the way, my house is empty right now. Something simple. Incorporate yourself, make someone else your registered agent, and buy the house in that corporation name instead of your own name. People in Hollywood do it all the time, so you can't find their houses. There are lots of different ways that don't have to be difficult. One of the best ones that I think, and I know in Texas, this is what I tell my clients, check the trespass laws in the state you are in. Here's why. In Texas, a person cannot get arrested for trespass unless they have received a specific notice that's defined under the code. So it's a notice from law enforcement, it's an official no trespass notice. The person, him or herself, can send the no trespass notice. Believe it or not, because welcome to Texas, if you tie like orange flags or orange ties around your trees a certain distance from your property, that is considered a notice of no trespass as a matter of law, but welcome to Texas. But I will tell my clients, if that you are being bothered, send that person a no trespass notice under the specific provisions of the Texas Penal Code. Because if you give them that notice that you are not welcome on my property, you are not welcome at my place of employment, you are not allowed, I'm not giving you permission to be at these addresses, and they show up, law enforcement now has the ability to arrest them on the spot. And so it's some things like simple things like that that you want to, that you can employ, I think, in your regular everyday life to try and keep yourself safe. But it's kind of like we work out to keep our lives living longer. We eat healthy to last longer in this life. And unfortunately, when you have a stalker, you kind of have to change your behavior so that for the same reason, so that they don't ultimately come get you. And I know it seems dramatic that it's, well, not every stalking case ends in death. I got to tell you, I don't want to be the one statistic where it does.
You know, one other thing too, it just occurred to me when you were going through that, and something that a lot of us wouldn't think of. There was a woman I interviewed who was all but killed by her husband one night, and she actually managed to get out of the house and make a run for it across the street in her neighborhood. But then it occurred to her, she went to a neighbor's house, and she could actually, from the neighbor's house, look out the window, and she could see the lights coming on and her husband running around the house trying to find her at this point, because there was like a break in him beating her up and hurting her. So at some point she figured, based upon the light that went on, somehow she figured out, oh my God, he's going in the basement, because she had tucked their dog down there, figuring that's one way to get even with me. Somehow, mercifully, he didn't get to the dog, and she got the dog out of there. Anyway, so when they finally were apart and the dust began to settle a little bit, and they had to deal with getting him in what turns out to be quite a lot of trouble. But I don't know how she discovered this idea. Maybe her dog was getting older. But anyway, she looked into protective dogs. Interesting. So I believe she lived maybe in New Jersey or something, and then farther northeast, Connecticut or someplace. I might be botching the states in this because it's been a minute since I've listened to this and did the recording. But she went there and she looked into this whole protective dog deal. The sweetest, nicest dogs, but when they get certain signals, they're not the sweetest, nicest dogs anymore.
Nope.
So you can pretty
Nope.
much walk in any neighborhood with these dogs. So she brought back a dog and had her fingers crossed about how this dog, who was maybe 3 or 4 years old, was going to deal with her 12-year-old dog who was kind of finishing up life. They were great pals. So the older dog eventually passed, and so she got a second dog, and then she got a third dog. All three are protective dogs, different breeds. And
That's
so
my kind of girl.
yeah, I mean, really, she doesn't need a gun because the guy's all chewed up, if something comes by. And that's the other part of it too, is like they're going to wake up and start barking before you're going to wake up and start noticing. So she's actually supporting she threw herself at this whole protective dog thing as she's become a trainer with them. So it's a great thing. I'm sad right now that I don't have that episode number. I just
Will you forward it to me, and I'll absolutely post that episode information. I'm a big Courtney's saying it's Kelly's Canines. She's a
Yes, it
nonprofit
is.
now for
Wow,
victims.
that's great.
Courtney,
Yeah.
thank you so much. Listen, I've had giant breeds for 25 years of every kind of mastiff there is possible, and so I'm a big fan of having an extremely well-trained animal. I've got my Cosmo who's sitting next to me now, 165 pounds of Mastiff and Great Dane, and I got to tell you, I feel much safer with Cosmo around, and I
Sure.
don't think most people are going to bother me with him around. So thank you for Kelly's Canines information. Courtney, if you could maybe DM the information if you have it to me, and I'll make sure I post it in the end of the notes on the live. I'd be more than happy to do so. Also, I saw Philly 512 join. Philly, thanks for joining. It's good seeing you. I hope you and the family are doing well. But it's been Courtney, thank you. And you will, Bill, give me the episode number so I can make reference to that as well, right?
Well, sure, of course.
Any closing thoughts? As usual, every time you and I talk, the time just evaporates.
It does. I know. It's great. No,
Bill, you are always, we'll have to do this again. I truly, truly enjoy talking to you and your insight and your knowledge. And I can't tell you how much it's people like you that help make a difference. And thank you for that. It means a lot, I know, to me and the people that you help out.
Yeah, I'm happy that I feel it's always a strange thing to say, but I feel very fortunate that I have a purpose in life. A lot of people get to the point where they retire and they kind of like, well, I put all my eggs in my job and I got nothing. So I know I got handed this purpose the hard way, but I'm happy I have it and I'm fairly good at it. So that's good. My closing statement would be that I know that I can't save my daughter's life. I think about her all the time. I feel like when I do something like this, I'm doing it with her, but I can't do anything about her fate. But there's a whole world of women everywhere, and I'm thinking women specifically, but men also can be on the receiving end. It's just not quite anywhere near as much. But there's a whole world of innocent women who can be saved and saved from a lifetime of heartbreaks, of just fear and pain and heartache. And so, it makes me feel good after these years of the book and the podcast to get an email now and then from someone who said, I listened to and I just got one from a woman in Sweden just yesterday morning. I read to my wife that was just going on and on about how helpful it was because she had a lot of feelings about her relationship with her husband, but didn't think of it specifically as abuse until she heard the other stories. So, that to me is all the energy I need. I get a big boost out of that. So I know everybody here at home, my wife and my son and I are happy that I'm doing this and that it's being received so much. So,
thank you. And I will tell you, if we can save just one person from doing something like this, then we've done the right thing. And I hope that I'm still fortunate enough to keep doing this. And I really hope that you and I can talk again soon.
Oh yeah, no doubt. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for asking me to do this because this was
no, this is fun.
perfect use of time. Yes.
Yes, correct. So you all can find Bill at his website, which is www.whendatinghurts.com. That's also his podcast, When Dating Hurts. And remember, over 2.5 million downloads for his podcast. It's a really good one. And make sure you listen to some of the episodes we referenced today, and I will supplement with the one we just talked about. I hope everyone has a blessed Friday, a good weekend, and has an amazing next week of work. Thank you all so much for tuning in.
Stay safe. Thanks.